Hello, welcome to Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor with Miles Hassell MD. This is an evidence-based podcast for people who want to use lifestyle choices to avoid preventable illness, as well as to treat illness. Listeners will learn the choices that work for better health outcomes for themselves, the ones that they love, and the patients they care for. We want to see patients liberated from the burden of chronic disease whenever possible. Hello, I'm Miles Hassell MD. I'm practicing internal medicine in Portland, Oregon, and you're listening to the podcast Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor, where we try to help you make good decisions that mean you're less dependent on medicine. And today we're talking about Big Pharma and why you probably shouldn't blame Big Pharma for your problems in most cases. Your lifestyle choices will largely mean that you don't need Big Pharma. And you've probably noticed a lot of headlines pointing at Big Pharma. Here's a few of them that we just collected rapidly recently about Big Pharma, the 6 things they don't want you to know, the people versus Big Pharma, tackling the industry's trust issues. Polls show Americans are fed up with the pharmaceutical industry. Why do they keep taking pills then? How Big Pharma makes a killing from letting people die. These are a little over the top, we would argue. And what people need to be thinking about is when they're pointing their finger at somebody, they've got 3 fingers pointing back at you, and we all need to remember that. So, what is Big Pharma? Single villain? A movement? A group of guys sitting around a table plotting their demise? I don't think so. It's a group of scientists and salespeople. Some of them work for government, some of them work for private industry, some of them work for academia, who are generally trying to make things that are intended to improve people's lives. Whether they're successful or not, that is another issue. And that applies to pretty much anything that you purchase. Cars, real estate, bicycles, Big Pharma. They're all being sold by humans. And humans are prone to exaggeration, self-promotion, fluffing the financial bottom line. They're looking for ways to enhance their own security and their own reputation. And that applies to pretty much every human being on the planet if you're not careful. That's why we have this saying, buyer beware. So nobody made you take that pill or that injection, right? So why did you take it? And what could you have done instead? And that's going to be the theme of this discussion. So when we think of Big Pharma, they're humans, they have something to sell, and they have fabulous marketing budgets. Well, that's all truisms. And some of the things they have to sell are potentially going to hurt you if used inappropriately. However, they can be fabulous and irreplaceable if used appropriately. A good example is modern treatments for lymphoma. Dramatically have changed the outcomes of the disease, and I could give you 100 other examples. Here's an example that might be near and dear to some of your hearts, and that is, would any of you deny the use of modern pharmaceuticals when it comes to anesthesia for major surgery? Think of that one through. Would you want to have major surgery without modern anesthesia agents? I bet you wouldn't. This is all Big Pharma. And admittedly, many things that they produce are of far less benefit. Pretty much everything has significant side effects. And so the issue is, are the potential benefits worth the potential side effects? And how much of a market base would they have? How many customers would they have if people took better care of themselves? And so you can divide Big Pharma into things that are really essential for your situation, which is relatively small proportion of the use of Big Pharma, and things that you wouldn't need if you took better care of yourself. But to just criticize Big Pharma for all of this is really a big mistake, any more than being too critical of your neighbor who might exaggerate the value of the bicycle he's trying to sell you. Might suggest it's a little better condition than it really is, that's a little younger than it really is, that it rides a little better than it really does. Remember, we're dealing with humans. Humans exaggerate when it's in their best interest to do so. Just let's try to make sure that we don't do that. In episode 14, we talked about high blood pressure drugs and how there's better alternatives for most people. Not for everybody, but for most people. Eating better, exercising better, losing weight will eliminate most cases of high blood pressure, but not all. And for those remaining cases, we're really glad we have modern pharmaceuticals to help people keep from getting a stroke. So the first thing to do is to say to yourself, what do I know about this drug and what do I know about this condition? What can I learn about this condition that would allow me to proceed without the use of medications or make the best choice of medications? When thinking about medications, remember to read the package insert. If you read the package insert for any number of blood pressure drugs or other prescriptions, or even ibuprofen, naproxen, Tylenol, you'll see all kinds of information about toxicity and adverse reactions that are really concerning and should make you think twice unless you have a really good reason to take that medication. And then you can say to yourself, what if there's a lifestyle solution that would actually work better than taking this medication? And so before you point the finger at Big Pharma and criticize them, say to yourself, what are your food and lifestyle and exercise and weight control habits looking like? In other words, are you just asking for trouble because you're asking for prescriptions from Big Pharma when your own prescription at your kitchen stove, at your stairwell with your own skip rope would be a far better choice? So, as any of you familiar with our work will know, then the lifestyle prescription starts with a whole food, Mediterranean-style omnivorous pattern of eating, mostly cooked at home. That's actually probably a pretty important aspect of this. It involves fiber foods like fruits and vegetables and beans and grains and nuts and seeds, which also include some pretty good fats, vegetables and fruit, animal proteins, cultured dairy like yogurt and kefir and cheese, olive oil, maybe a small amount of alcohol, plenty of exercise every day, controlling your waistline. These are all the critical foundational parts of being healthy and of avoiding Big Pharma. Let's look at an example. So Cindy is a fit and active 55-year-old. She swam regularly. She was actually kind of a model of good health, but she still had pretty high triglycerides and high blood pressure, and a really worrisome family history of early heart disease. And so she's looking at these factors, and the factor inflammatory markers were higher, and said, you know what, I'm a lot healthier than most of my friends, but what else could I be doing? Because I've been put on a couple of different blood pressure medications, and that just doesn't seem like a good solution for the next 20, 30, 40 years to be taking blood pressure medications. What else could I do? So we went over her food choices, her waistline, her habits, and her fitness was superb. We didn't have to work on that. But there were a lot of refined carbohydrates in the form of breads and sweets that she could get rid of. And she was weighing, I mentioned she was in fabulous shape physically, but she was still about easily 10 pounds overweight in terms of the weight around her middle. So when we're thinking overweight, we're always thinking about the central fat mass, central fat mass. So we're not really thinking about your total weight so much. So she cut back on her breads and sweets. She lost about 10 pounds. She maintained her fitness. She had a dramatic increase in her HDL, the so-called good cholesterol, a dramatic decrease in her triglycerides. They cut by 2/3. And her blood pressure, which untreated had been in the 150s over high 90s, like 154 over 98 would be a typical blood pressure for her, dropped to 112 over 70 with no medications. That's not unusual in our practice to see when people rein in their food, rein in their waistline, and maintain their activity. Then we see dramatic benefits with the blood pressure as well as lots of other things as well. And of course, she didn't need blood pressure medicines. Her well-being improved. And frankly, when people take better care of themselves and lose weight, they usually look better too. So I should point out that there was some cosmetic benefits to all this. Now, if you're ever in this situation, before you get off all your blood pressure medications, work with your doctor to make sure what you're doing is making sense. Because the body doesn't like surprises. The body likes having something predictable. So as you lose weight and your blood pressure comes down, you can reduce your medications. To just go cowboy on this is not necessarily a good idea unless you really know what you're doing. Think of this as for our cancer patients. So our cancer patients often kind of feel like they're purely in the grip of Big Pharma. And to some extent, this is probably one of the shining areas for Big Pharma is improving cancer care. Does that mean that every cancer medication that's being offered to you if you have cancer is going to do a good job for you? No, it does not. And we'll talk about some of the critical thinking questions a little bit later. But it's worth, regardless of your treatment for your cancer, then people who follow a whole food diet cooked at home, who practice waste management, meaning losing excess fat around their middle, and daily exercise, to the extent that it's been studied, which is considerable, we see this group having reduced deaths from all causes, including from their cancer, less side effects from the cancer therapies. In other words, things like radiation and surgery and chemotherapy all seem to be something people bounce back from, faster from. Better energy, and lower cancer recurrence rates. In other words, the benefits of lifestyle for the cancer patient appears to be about in the same order of magnitude as treatments with chemotherapy and radiation. It should be part of the basic treatment that you choose for your cancer. And there's nothing involving Big Pharma. So we're anticipating that our cancer survivorship and prevention guide is going to be out by the end of October of this year, 2024. It's going to be a comprehensive look at the choices you can make to better improve your cancer survivorship. And it will be similar in construction to our diabetes prevention and reversal guide that's already on our website, greatmed.org. We have on our YouTube channel, we have this story of Jeff, who did a great deal for using diet and lifestyle for his type 1 diabetes, which is a different animal to type 2 diabetes. But look at what this patient, Stephanie, did for her type 2 diabetes that made her pretty much dodge Big Pharma. And so she's 44 years old, she's a mother of 3, and she has a new diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. And she has microalbuminuria, which means that she's already has some kidney damage from her diabetes. She has a history of obesity, depression, fibromyalgia. She's taking heart medications and thyroid medications. She doesn't feel very good. And now she's got type 2 diabetes with kidney injury to add to her list. And she's only in her early 40s with 3 small children. She did have a history of gestational diabetes with each of her 3 pregnancies, which should have been used by the medical profession to warn her that she needed to take better care of herself, because that predicts the likelihood of getting type 2 diabetes. But here she is. So she's 5'4", she's 196 pounds. She has fairly uncontrolled diabetes. HbA1c of 10.7% is a marker of uncontrolled diabetes that she's probably had for at least 5 or 10 years. She has the kidney damage we already mentioned. She's on a bunch of different medications, including a dose of atenolol, which is a very effective heart medicine, a dose of atenolol that would make most of us feel pretty poorly, frankly. It would typically cause substantial fatigue. She has some liver injury, presumably from fatty liver. And so we worked with her to improve her diet and exercise using the same simple tools that you'll read in our greatmed.org guidelines for type 2 diabetes reversal. And what do you know? She loses a little bit of weight, not all that much, but enough. She reverses her diabetes completely. She's no longer diabetic, and she requires no medications. Her liver injury has resolved. Her kidneys are better. Her thyroid is now normalized, so she doesn't need thyroid medicines. Her cholesterol is substantially better. And she's maintained this for the last 3 years. So this was not just a flash in the pan. This was not a brief diet. This was a lifestyle change with enduring benefit, and will change her long-term health outlook, her family's long-term health outlook, because the children are going to be seeing a much better example as they grow up than anything else that could have been done. And it didn't require Big Pharma. In fact, she was able to almost fire Big Pharma. So what did she do? She planned ahead. If you don't plan ahead in using lifestyle, you're going to be stuck with Big Pharma, because Big Pharma is designed for people who don't want to plan ahead, who don't really want to think too hard. She minimized liquid calories, sweets, foods made with that are high in starch, especially made with flour, and highly processed foods. She had fruit and vegetables with every meal and snack, and proteins. She worked on portion control and intermittent fasting strategies. Works for some people, doesn't work for everybody. She was active 2 or 3 times a day. She lost some weight, and she was accountable. She realized she was a mother with responsibilities, and she didn't want to be on a whole bunch of Big Pharma. So, before you criticize Big Pharma, are you taking care of yourselves with homemade food, daily exercise, waste management, sleep, as you should? Do you reach too quickly for a pill when putting up with symptoms would be a better choice? And I'm looking at you, ibuprofen and naproxen and Tylenol. Not because you're an evil product of Big Pharma, but because you don't make things better as a general rule. There's very, 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 very few situations that improve because of those medications. What they do is they reduce pain. And maybe you'd be far better off in most cases, not every case. There's exceptions to everything I'm saying. But for the majority of people, if you've sprained your ankle, you probably shouldn't be taking a pain medicine unless you absolutely have to. You should put up with some pain, rest it, learn what their body likes to do and what it doesn't want to do. And you might find that over time, you actually notice less pain because your pain receptors change. And for those of us that don't take pain medicines, we find that we don't actually experience any more pain than people who do take pain medicines because our body has learned how to handle pain better. There's lots of exceptions to that, what I'm saying. And we prescribe stronger pain medicines not infrequently. If I ever have a broken bone, I'm probably going to want something stronger. Do you take a pill when you should trust your body to get better? Frequently, we see people with clear-cut viral bronchitis that we know does not improve with antibiotics, and they still want antibiotics just to be on the safe side. Or they eat lousy food and they want to take a chemical multivitamin just to be on the safe side. That's just false thinking. It doesn't make sense. And it implies a tremendous faith in Big Pharma. And these are often people who are criticizing Big Pharma. What are they thinking? That's what I want to know. And do you blindly accept a doctor's prescription without applying critical thinking on whether it's a good idea? Because remember, doctors often are responding to what they think the patient wants. Doctors generally want to make their patients happy. And if giving your patients a prescription will make them happy, then they give the prescription. So one of the first questions you can ask your doctor is, would you take this for this problem? And it's often that will lead to a very, very interesting conversation. So it's not uncommon for me to write a prescription, hand it to the patient and say, here you go, but I wouldn't take it. And I'm amazed how often patients actually don't pursue that point. So here's some critical thinking before you take a prescription or over-the-counter medicine. This even applies to nutritional supplements, for example. So first, will my ailment get better by itself if I do nothing? Or should I employ some lifestyle medicine or some folk remedies that will make better sense than this medicine? An example of this is, for example, the common cough. You get a bronchitis, you're coughing a bit, you have a presentation to make, you don't want to cough, and so you take a prescription cough medicine. You know what might work just as well is the old folk remedy of some lemon and honey, or just a teaspoon of honey taken straight before you give that talk. That probably works about as well for common coughs as most cough medicines. So, what is the potential harm from taking this medicine? And did you read the package insert? If you didn't read the package insert, then you don't have a thing to say about Big Pharma. You're not even employing the information that they're giving you. So, read the package inserts. That's usually enough to raise your hair. It might even curl your hair. What is the potential benefit from this medicine? Have the prescriber give you up-to-date data from the literature, from the published literature. For example, you could ask the prescriber, hey, if I take this medicine, if you look at 100 people like me who take this medication for maybe 5 years, how much benefit do they see? Benefits in terms of heart attacks or strokes or something else. And that's especially good for medicines that you can't actually see a benefit from. For example, if you have a rash and they give you a medicine for it and the rash goes away, that's kind of something you can judge for yourself. But watch out that you don't just assume that a medication that's being prescribed to you will work. Find out the facts. And don't fall for dumb ideas. We already talked about anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen and naproxen. So if somebody says, you need to take this anti-inflammatory because you have an ankle sprain and ankle sprains involve inflammation, you should suppress that inflammation. Hold on a second. Inflammation is the major tool for your body's healing response. If somebody's going to say that, shouldn't they be able to show that ibuprofen improves inflammation and improves your healing? I think they would struggle to find out either one of those things compared to not taking an anti-inflammatory and instead working with excellent nutrition, activity is tolerated, and getting better on your own. If you aren't willing to put this kind of work into investigating Big Pharma's claims, you don't have a basis for criticizing Big Pharma. It'd be like taking a salesman's word on your next car purchase. Wow, brand X is really good. It's perfect. It's just right what you should have to get for yourself. Wow, brand X of a car is perfect for you. You really need this and you look great in it. People usually don't fall for that line. They go look at brand Y and brand Z too. Makes sense. Be a critical thinker. Thanks again. I'm Miles Hassell MD that practices in internal medicine in Portland, Oregon. The website is greatmed.org. The book is Good Food, Great Medicine. And the podcast that you're listening to right now is Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor. Thank you.